I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. My life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. It's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. My life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. Every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able,
And hello again. Thank you for joining us for another week here at the Gathering QC. We're glad that you're with us. And if you follow us from week to week, you may notice that I'm a little bit out of the pattern of where I usually record. I'm here at home. Work schedule was a little bit different out of the normal pattern, and so it's later at night, and I'm here at home recording tonight. I thought I would test your attention span because I've got my stacks over here, got books stacked up behind me. This is kind of where I keep my stack of work and books that I'm working on for particular projects at the time. So hopefully it's not so busy. There's a guitar, this side, over here, this side, there you go, behind me. So hopefully you'll be able to focus in on what we're doing today, because we're talking about the book of Ecclesiastes, and today we're talking about finding meaning and purpose in a frustrating world. Now, let me just start by just saying, what did you want to be when you were a kid, when you grew up? When you were a kid and you grew up, you probably, a lot of kids want to be an astronaut, or they want to be a fireman, or for me, I wanted to be a professional tennis player, still holding on to that dream. We always had these dreams of what we were going to do. Actually, my dream was, ever since I was a little kid, I had the dream of being a doctor. And then, what did you want to do when you grow up? Most of us wanted to change the world in some way. We wanted to make an impact. And then life happens. Often you go to college, you get busy, you go to work, maybe have a family, you have bills, you have things that just have to be taken care of. And so things get so busy that we can often experientially feel like life has very little meaning except trying to get through the work week, trying to make ends meet, trying to get Johnny a pair of shoes, and just trying to do what we can. And so we're going to talk about that today, as we've talked about the book of Ecclesiastes as what we're calling a reality monitor. It's a book that helps to bring our feet back down to the ground. Ecclesiastes as a reality monitor. Actually, the author is working through some of the same issues right in front of us, right on the pages of our Bibles. That's the reason I love Scripture so much. I say this over and over again, is it tells us the truth. The writer of Ecclesiastes is wrestling, trying to find meaning and purpose in his life when life seems to be flying by the writer. And so he's wrestling with what does it mean to have purpose. And so, we've talked about, just as in the introduction to this series, what do you do with a book like Ecclesiastes? Because it's an unsettling book. It doesn't have the happy, clappy, we're all okay kind of tone, but it wrestles with a lot of the deep things in life. And one commentator says that it has to be approached with openness to God and openness to change, that we notice that our life changes, our situations change, our circumstances change, and we have to be broken from the illusion that we can control everything that happens in this life. So consequently, the book of Ecclesiastes starts off in chapter 1, verse 2, with this from the NIV. The second verse says, meaningless. Everything is utterly meaningless. Well, this is a strange book to try to teach about meaning and purpose for our lives out of this book, but it's one that we're going to wrestle with out of the book of Ecclesiastes. So now, we talked about earlier that the word meaningless in the NIV is not the best translation. The Hebrew word, havel, literally means breath or wind. So the writer is not saying that life is really meaningless or pointless, but what he's actually saying is that life is like a breath or wind. It's short, it's hard to capture, and it's constantly changing. And he says that when we try to control it, when we try to hang on to it too tightly, it's like chasing the wind. And he starts off by saying we work hard trying to make a profit, trying to get more money, more stuff, bigger houses, bigger bank accounts, and we can wind up just simply chasing the wind. That this is the kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily bring happiness. And then he also says that there's there's that pesky fact that we also all die. And so the couple of points that we made earlier is that a meaningful life does not entail getting to be more than human. That we have to, in order to find meaning, we have to recognize that we're limited, we're not always in control of what happens, and we do die. So we don't know everything and we can't control everything. Also, we talked about that finding a meaningful life is learning how to wear our mortality comfortably, making peace with the limitations that we have, that as humans that we are limited. So it means in this limited time, limited space, limited control that we have, we need to receive each moment, each day, each person as a gift, finding joy in the present. Lamenting and grieving when it's time to do that, letting go when we need to do that, but also recognizing the joy in life comes with being connected with God's purposes and with God's people. And so we also talked last night that we have to wear our mortality comfortably when we recognize that we all are terminal, that we all will die. And so we need to live a good life now. Now we're going to stay with the same passage, part of the same passage that we read last week out of the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I'm going to read chapter 3, 9 through 13. It says, "What do workers gain from their toil?" he asked. "I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil, because this is the gift of God." Now, even though Ecclesiastes is a difficult book because you read it and it kind of disrupts our, happy clappy world, there's really some important things to learn, especially about finding purpose and meaning in our life. First thing we notice in this passage is he talks about that he recognizes that there's the burden of life. There's the burden of mountains to climb and disruptions in your life. But he says God has a way of turning things also into beautiful things, that there's a lot of joy. There's a lot of happiness to be had if we live within the flow of God's timing. And then also, whoever wrote the book of Ecclesiastes shows that the human life has huge capacity for meaning. And the writer is trying to connect the dots of our life, of how we can find happiness and satisfaction by living in the acknowledgement that life is a gift of God. One of the ways he says this is he says that God has also set eternity in the human heart. Now, the Hebrew word olam, when it says he set eternity, the word there is elam. It doesn't necessarily mean that we long for heaven, which we do, but elam also is translated long periods of time, long periods in the past, or maybe long periods in the future. Sometimes it's translated everlasting. And so even beyond, what we can manage in the past or beyond what we see in the future. So what it means when he says he set eternity in our hearts, it simply means that God has placed within us the desire to believe that we fit something bigger, that we live for more than just this moment, but we're in the flow of something bigger than ourselves, that our lives have real purpose, real impact, real meaning to it. And that's what he means. So we all have the longing to search and find meaning in our lives. And that's what the writer of Ecclesiastes is teaching us, that we all want to feel like we have a part of our lives or a part of the fabric of something larger than just ourselves. Now, psychology experts have described the inner working of feeling like your life has meaning and purpose. And they said that it basically, many psychologists boil it down to three things that happen if we're to find meaning and purpose for our lives. It's coherence and purpose and significance. Coherence is that we need to feel like the life events fit together in some way. that everything is not just chance and fate, but there is some coherence to our life, that the events of our life kind of fit together in some kind of meaningful way, and that's called coherence. The second thing that human life needs to find meaning is purpose. This is the belief that you're alive in order to do something meaningful, that there are goals, and that there are aims in your life that you have, that you can see that in front of you there are purposes and plans to do something good. And then the third thing is significance. And this is the belief that your life matters, that thinking that the people around you value you and that your life is making a difference to them and to the world. So these are the three things that psychologist talks about needing for a balanced and healthy sense of life: coherence and purpose and significance. Now, I mentioned this in the first week that we talked, that the writer of Ecclesiastes talks about there's a lot of burdens in this life, but there's also the beauty of believing that God has set this desire to be a part of something bigger, to find meaning and purpose in our lives. But in the middle of this, we have to put it in the context of our modern world, especially in the Western world, where we found that instead of meaning and purpose, a lot of people are finding depression and anxiety. Sources tell us that more and more people are seeking help for depression and anxiety. It could be that we're open to it more, and that's a good thing. And we want to say that that's a good thing, that we believe that people need to ask for help when you need it. But I just read another article today that, especially over the last few years, that particularly among our young people, that the anxiety and depression levels have soared, particularly among young ladies. And I don't know the answer to all of that, but we have to recognize that something within our lives and our society is causing us to be ill at ease with trying to find meaning and purpose for our lives. And I read several books that talks about as well as the biological changes that occur with depression and anxiety, and sometimes medication is a way to help those. But there is also social and psychological causes, and one of the latest research is that all of the causes kind of have something in common, and one writer called it just disconnectedness. Some of the leading causes of depression and anxiety is feeling disconnected. And there's several things that he lists, but one of them is that disconnected from meaningful work means that you have the feeling that maybe your job isn't making a difference, or maybe your boss is impossible to work for, and that you're stuck there, and so you're kind of miserable in your work environment, or that there's little or no room for advancement or improvement, and you just feel stuck in doing something that you just don't love, and that can cause levels of depression and anxiety because people can't see a future for anything better. The second thing of disconnected, he says, disconnected from other people, and it's gotten worse. The studies show with the rise of the internet and with all the social media that people in some ways are connected through screens, but they're still lonely. That one of the things that leads to a lot of anxiety and depression is some level of loneliness, that there aren't people really in your life. There could be a lot of people around us, but that people aren't either listening to us or valuing us, or that we've maybe lost someone that we loved, and we have this sense of loneliness, and we can be disconnected from other people. Another way that we're disconnected is disconnected from meaningful values, that we don't do things anymore for just the pure joy of doing them because we value them or because they're right or wrong, but we tend to wind up in our society of doing things only for extrinsic goals, such as more money and more stuff. We tend to look at those kinds of things instead of just the value of living life because it's good and right and joyful. And the last thing is that people sometimes suffer from depression because of disconnected from a secure and hopeful future. Maybe job security is poor. That a lot of people suffer from believing that they could be without work at any time, and it just gives them a crushing feeling. Or maybe someone has been abused in the past and now I can't trust anyone and I can't really bring security to my mind. Or maybe you've just been watching the news and believing overwhelmed with the craziness in the world, but you feel like you've lost control of your future. These are some of the things that I'm learning about depression and anxiety, is just this loss of connection to meaningful work or to people or to values or to a hopeful future, that somehow we've lost control of our future and trying to make sense of how we can find purpose and meaning in our lives. And so I just wanted you to know from the very beginning that I pray for people. I had moments of depression several years ago. A lot of it was because of medication that I was on. It was rated for having possibility of causing more depression in your moods, and it did in me. And it took me several months. And I remember wrestling for a couple of months with these heightened senses of being disconnected, that I was a failure at a lot of things that I was doing, that I was disconnected from meaningful work, just these things that somewhat were kind of unnatural thoughts, but they just kind of, compounded upon me. And so I have a heart for people that find themselves in this season of life. And so I'm praying that God will give you some direction and help and hope and help you to find some purpose and meaning in your life, even in these frustrating times. So let me just talk about two issues real quick. Is that, how did we get here in these frustrating times? One of them is that our current societal backdrop has undercut the belief that God has infused the world with purpose and meaning and direction. And I've talked before at our church about how we've kind of squeezed God out of our natural lives. He's just not on our radar screen. And so we tend to have lost in our society the belief that there's a big picture, that God is actually, moving our world and our lives toward a finale, to a good ending. And we've kind of lost that belief that God has infused the world with purpose and with meaning. And so the writer says, though, that in order for us to really find some meaning and purpose, that we have to find, as he says in chapter 3, verse 11, that God is still making things beautiful in his time, that God has still got the world in his hands. And we may not know what God is up to at every moment, but we have to believe that God is still at work in our world. And then the second thing I want to say is that our lack of this big picture of meaning drives many people to search for temporary happiness instead of real eternal meaning and purpose. The writer of Ecclesiastes did just this. And he describes it in Ecclesiastes 2 about how when he was looking for real deep meaning and purpose, he instead tried to search for temporary happiness. And you search for happiness in all the wrong places. Listen to what he says in Ecclesiastes 2, verse 1. He says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasures to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. So listen to what all he chased. Verse 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and built vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. All of this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all of my labor, and this was the reward for all of my toil. Yet, listen to this, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what my toils had achieved, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind, and nothing was gained under the sun. So the writer of Ecclesiastes says, man, I went for pleasures, I had wine, I had women, I had stuff, I built houses and vineyards and trees, I bought slaves, I had wealth more than anyone around, I had control, I'd become greater than anyone around Jerusalem. And he said, I found that chasing these pleasures, chasing these temporary things that I thought would bring happiness, was simply still chasing after the wind. Now, this led me to recall a study that Barna Research did a few years ago. Did a study survey that found that happiness in the last few years was on the rise. But then, as they studied it deeper, they found something unique, that happiness was often tied to the moment, and that it could decline just as quickly as it rose. It tended to be a very self-centered description of how people felt right that moment. If they had good health at the moment, had a good job, had a secure income, had the purchase power to do what I wanted, then their happiness would go up. But when there was an economic downturn, or when something was not happening positive in their life, then their happiness level went down. So it was up and down. But what they found was that happiness was defined by what I had. It was a very self-focused and kind of a self-centered description of how I felt happy at one moment, and maybe I would lose it in the next moment. All of those factors could change at the drop of a hat, and happiness could swing one way or the other. But they went on to do some additional research and showed that there was a difference between happiness that could move up and down and finding real deep meaning in life. And here's what they found. Meaning in life through this other study was found to reside in giving, in the joy of being connected and giving to others. People who registered high levels of meaning and purpose in their life scored high in delight when they were able to help others, when they were investing in their kids and their grandkids, when they were sacrificing their time and their finances to helping others in need. They had found purpose and meaning, not in amassing things for themselves, but they had found purpose for their life by helping the world, helping people, being invested in others. In other words, the happiness quotient is mostly about what I'm getting, what I want, but the deep meaning was about being a part of something bigger and about making a contribution to people around me and to the world. And so when we find the book of Ecclesiastes again, it says that God has set us as people to have and discover real deep meaning, and that we should be a joyful people because we're doing good while we are here. Now, there's another thing that can cause this lack of this frustration of trying to find meaning, is that disruptions in life can cause us to lose sight of our purpose. He says in this book that no one can fathom, even though God is making things beautiful and he's put eternity in our hearts, meaning that the desire to be a part of something bigger. But life has a lot of bumps and disruptions. We don't get to control life. We lose people that we love. And these disruptions can cause us to lose sight of our purpose. But we believe that God is at work and that God is helping us to make meaning. And so I want to just end today by just talking about a few practical steps for finding meaning and purpose. And the first one is, they all start with S. One of them is start with God. The other one is service to others. And the other is savor the joys of the moment. There's some practical things to help us to find something deeper than just happiness. Deeper than just acquiring stuff, deeper than just, making money. and feeling secure with our finances. Even deeper than that, those things may help to find some stability, but I'm talking about real purpose and meaning. The first one is start with God. I believe that in order for someone to really find deep meaning, they've got to be a part of the grain of the universe of God's creative love and joy that He puts in life. That we have to discover the gifts that God has given us. We have to savor the moments that God gives us. It all starts with the belief that God is at work. God is taking this world somewhere, and that we're part of this great plan of God that He has for you and for the world. That's where meaning starts. And then based on the research I just discovered, the second thing is if you want to find real meaning in life and purpose, you got to find a way to serve others, connect it to other people's lives. It's not enough to get and to, happiness of I have this and I want that and I can get what I want. Meaning is discovered in how God has equipped you to be a blessing to others, serving others. So I want to challenge you, if you want to find real meaning and purpose, find ways to be meaningful to other people. And that will build a deep sense of purpose in your life when you see that we're all interconnected through the plan of God. And then the third and the last thing is that savor the joys of the moment. The writer of Hebrews over and over again says that we need to realize that all these things are a gift of God. Every moment, every encounter, every person that's a part of our life, it is a gift of God that we need to savor. And it's okay to find the joy in just the simple things in life, because these moments are the gift of God. I know that we live in a frustrating world, and I know that people have a lot of things on their mind, and I know that people are busy, and I know that people are scratching, trying just to make a living. But God has put eternity in our hearts, the desire to be part of His plan, something bigger. And we do that by centering ourselves on God, serving others, and savoring every moment as a gift that God has given us. I pray that you will find that deep, deep, deep meaning as being a part of something beautiful God is doing in your life. I pray that in Christ's name. Amen and amen. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.